we pick up with Zawahiri, who, as you mentioned, as a young boy is already involved in efforts to overthrow the government of Egypt because it's not devout enough, doesn't follow the religious line he would like it to see. Tell us how his career evolves in the broader context of the violent underground that emerged in Egypt into the late 60s, into the 1970s, culminating in '82 with the assassination of Anwar Sadat. What was going on in Egypt? Who were the actors there? And how does Zawahiri emerge as a prominent player?
He was a secretive individual to start with, and at that time, in the beginning in the 70s, all of Egypt was a fervent underground of radical actors, furious at the state, wanting to the things that were prompting those kinds of uprisings. The example of the Shah being overthrown in Iran, that was an amazing moment in the history of radical Islam, because it showed that their dreams weren't impossible. A radical figure can take over a country and turn it into a theocracy. So it isn't all a fairy tale. That just inspired so many young radicals like Zawahiri, who despised the Shiites, who were, Ayatollah Khomeini represented, and felt that the Sunnis were the logical place to do that, but they just spurred them on. They were infuriated by such things as, the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. They were stunned by the invasion of the Soviet Union into Afghanistan, the occupation of a Muslim country by another. The same year, 1979, there was a takeover in a mosque, in the Grand Mosque in Mecca, by radical Muslims who will call for the overthrow of the Saudi royal family. All of these instances added to the radical fervor that was spreading throughout Egypt and the rest of the Muslim world. Zawahiri was a part of that, organizing in a very secret manner young men like him who were many of them professionals. He was a doctor, a medical student. Others were engineers, technicians, army officers, policemen. This was a highly professional cadre that he put together. And gradually, these independent cells became aware of others, and they began to associate in a loose network. And the network that Zawahiri was a part of was called Al-Jihad. It was that group that eventually assassinated Anwar Sadat in 1981. And Zawahiri was tangentially involved in it. He was later convicted of smuggling arms, and he served 3 years in prison in the Egyptian prisons. And he tortured. The practices at that time were to throw them into a cage with wild, starving dogs, and often beaten by prison guards. I mean, just really alarming sorts of things. I believe, along with many human rights advocates, that the carnage that's so typical of Al-Qaeda was born in those Egyptian prisons.
One of the stories you tell in the Looming Tower is of not just the torture of Zawahiri, but his informing, giving the names of some of his fellow members. And when he's released from prison, he's released essentially in disgrace in the circles in which he was involved because he did inform. And so his career, if we can call it that, becomes highly problematic. I believe he has to leave Egypt at this point. And he is sort of wandering in different Muslim countries. His betrayal of his colleagues is known. And yet he's looking still for a way to remain involved, remain a leader, in fact, of these kinds of movements.
That's one reason that he had to hide behind other personalities. Zawahiri is the main actor on this stage in many respects. He's the organizing genius, he's the propagandist, he's the one that has created these networks of networks and brought them all together. But he always required a figurehead to act in front of him, because when he tried to act on his own, as he did when he tried to run Al-Jihad himself, it invariably fell apart. internal dissension tore it apart. Security breaches led authorities to discover the names of the members and round them up. It was one catastrophe after another under his leadership. I think he recognized eventually the limitations of his own authority.